There are two thoughts that I want to give in this video. One comes from Blake and the other one comes from Neville. And the one from Blake says that I must create a system or be enslaved by another man's. I will not reason, I will not compare. My business is to create. And I've thought about this quote for about a few years now. And the more I think about it, the more I agree with it. And the reason I agree with it is because we're kind of born into this world. It kind of feels like you're dropped off into an ocean, and you just hope there are people around you who will help you. And it feels kind of lonely to a degree because you have to do everything alone, right? And you're born into systems of beliefs and thoughts. And it could be a family system. You can make it small, and you can expand it to a government system. Expand it a bit more. You can say it's nature's system, biological systems. There's all these systems that dictate and control you to a large extent. And it can feel sort of defeating when you kind of look at it that way, because there's so much control over you and there's such little control you can exert, or you have very little power, it appears. Once said that it feels like you tell the wind to stop and it doesn't stop. You tell the sun to cool down and it won't. You tell it to come out and it won't. You try to tell nature what to do and it doesn't seem to care about your voice. And it tends to feels like, what's the point of my voice if it doesn't seem to do anything. But to get to the Neville point, which he said that subjective appropriation for the objective hope. He always said that subjective appropriation of the objective hope. Now, these two, I think, go together, these two thoughts of Blake and Neville. And the reason is because we do come into a world of systems of thought. I know, like, Blake wasn't really a fan of bowing to the king. It was something you had to do in his time. There are things we have to do in our time, and you might not be fond of, you might not like. I totally understand it because I have the same thing. But what Blake is saying is that he understood that you're governed by systems if you don't create your own. Now, he's telling you to create your own system. Now, what does it mean to create your own system? He does mean it as far as creating your own system of imagination, like what you want to imagine, what you want to do. That's why I think Neville comes in, because he says subjective appropriation. Now, appropriation is a very important word in this quote. It's the most important word, because one thing I've learned about this life, unfortunately, I say unfortunately because I wish it wasn't this way. I wish it was a bit more peaceful, I guess. But in this world, you have to take things. That's just what you have to do. And if we can see that life is mental before physical, then to a degree you have this advantage to use. At least try it, right, before you knock it. Just see, at least see. And what Neville's saying is subjective appropriation of the objective. So what do I want to objectify in my life? That's what I will subjectively appropriate within myself. Now, what does appropriation mean? It means he used this word all the time. If you pay attention to his work, he used it all the time. And it means to take as possession, to take as yours. That's what he's saying. Now, the reason why I made a post one time talking about you have all these versions of yourself, and since they're you, they're yours, I was trying to find a way to appropriate in a more smooth fashion by understanding that these thoughts, these ideas, these concepts of yourself are yours to have, right? So it allows you to sort of have them in a I guess, smoother way, instead of just feeling like you have to pounce on it and take it. At least that's how I think about it in imagination. But when you go inside yourself, you should see things as yours for the taking. They're yours to take. They're yours to feast upon. And when you start to imagine new things for yourself, you're going to come into contact with a lot of the beliefs of the systems you were given. So the way you were taught about yourself, the way you thought about yourself your whole life came from systems of thought. And you can you have a regressive thought and say, what created that system? What created that system? And you will find out it really comes back to man. So it's you. It's you who creates these things. And so you have to follow what Blake says, create a system of thought, and then do what Neville says, which is to appropriate things. And, I just talked to a friend who said, he sent me, I think, a comment of what someone said. And this person said, they kind of asked themselves what Neville would do. And I thought it was interesting because I was just thinking about that for about a week. And there's this common question is, what would Neville do? What would Neville do? But if you read Neville carefully, you will know what he would do. He would imitate God, which is the only thing he cared about. He would imitate God. And God calls things that are unseen as though they are seen. That's what he would imitate. And so that's what you should imitate. And he is saying to call the thing unseen as though it is seen in this quote. It's just another way of saying the subjective appropriation of the objective hope. What do I want to objectify about myself and my world? That is the thing I will subjectively appropriate within. And he said, you might not believe it, but all things were once subjectively appropriated inside the individual, the things that they have. And he says appropriation there again, which is to take, to have it as your possession. It's a big difference between fantasizing about an idea and actually living from the idea. So when Neville speaks of having conviction or being persuaded, it's the same way. It's a knowing. Belief is a knowing. You know it. The same way you don't believe your heart's beating. You know it's beating. If you can get to that belief, that is what we're talking about. We say that knowing of yourself. You're so sure of it, of you, that you are this thing that you once weren't. But if you know it's a mental state, you will appropriate it. You will take it. And the way you take it, the way you truly appropriate something, is you know it. You know you're that. You just know it. That's the belief we're speaking about. And how does one know that they know something? They live from it. They live from these ideas. Because you can go to a mall and you can see hundreds of people walking. And yeah, they're physically walking inside a little space, but what actually has happened is that they're mentally walking somewhere. They're all walking a path mentally. They're on some track. And the track they're walking is the one they have appropriated. That's the one they're living from. That's the one they're convicted by. That's the one they feel they believe in. Our real beliefs are what we live by, as Neville said. And so the issue in man is that he can't trust his imagination implicitly. He believes in something outside of himself to give him something. That's not what Neville says. He says it's about man appropriating, taking whatever it is he wants to have inside. He takes it as his own, as his own possession. He has ownership over it. And so when you ask somebody, well, do you believe in your age? They would say, well, no, I don't believe in my age. That's what my age is when I was born. They just know it. They don't have to sit there and try to figure it out. That's what you have to get to. That's the conviction you need of yourself. You know it. And how do you know something? Well, you have to get there through trust. You trust in the knowing that you are that thing. And what are you trusting in? Your imagination. And where is your imagination? It's in myself. So what am I trusting in? I'm trusting in myself. And is my imagination nothing but a mirror reflecting the contents of what I believe myself to be? It's a living mirror. It's not stale and just reflects your face. It shows you images, a bunch of conversations, all implying something about you. It can be mundane. It can also be great, but it's yours for the appropriation. All things exist in the imagination. All those things were given to you, the good and the bad, the blessings and the cursings. But choose life. That's what Scripture tells you to do, to choose life. Choose the life more abundant. It's a choice. You're given the choice between these things. And you can sit down like I've done and imagine things that weren't worth your time because you were convinced by some system of belief to think of yourself that way and to see yourself that way. And so your imagination becomes restricted and has all these walls in front of it. But the great wall, really the wall of Jericho, is the outside. So you imagine beyond it. You go beyond the wall. And you see yourself expressing, which is to imagine the flower. You don't imagine the seed. You don't imagine how did you come to express this? You just see yourself expressing it. And you just keep holding that vision of yourself. That's imagining the flower. That is appropriation. And you know yourself to be it. How do I know myself to be something? I live by it. That's what I imagine from. And living is correlated with my imagination. So what am I imagining by? That's what I live by. That's what I really believe in. What I continuously am, or the place I go to all the time in my mind is where I live. That's what I live by. That's what I believe in truly about myself. May not be flattering. It might be, but it may not be. But if it's not flattering, change it. Remember, and what is change other than forgiveness? You can't really forgive someone unless they change, right? Forgiveness and change are completely linked. So once you change yourself from imagining from a new position, knowing yourself to be different, that's the belief we're talking about. To that level, to that degree, you know it. That's forgiveness. That's actually a form of forgiveness from Scripture. Now, when you see it that way, with a loving twist to it, you see appropriation, again, comes down to forgiveness. Appropriation is the new system of belief, or the new system you must live by, which is to imitate God. Call things that are unseen as though they are. You're either going to imitate God or you're going to imitate some person. But try to imitate God. And then you found a new system to live under, a new idea to live under, which is you call things that are unseen as though they are seen. You know them. They're yours. You have them. You live from it. And you know a little objectify, because you're taking the objective hope and you subjectively appropriate it, which really comes down to forgiveness, which is a form of forgiveness. So all these things are linked together in Neville's work. And I think that's why he was interested in Blake. Blake said it his own way, and Neville said his own. And I'm just trying to thread it all together, and why Neville was interested in Blake, and why Blake was interested in the Bible, and why these men wanted to at least study this. And I see how it's so freeing when you look at it that way. But if you think it's like a constant work to get to that knowing, then you're going to feel like you're going to tear your hair out, because it's just going to feel exhausting. You know it. You just know you are it. You don't have to be persuaded. You've already self-persuaded. Remember what it says in Scripture, to commune with yourself. You're not communing for another. You're not persuading another. You're not trying to convict another. You are becoming self-convicted, self-persuaded, communing with yourself on what it is you want to do. And how do I do that? Subjectively appropriate the objective hope. That is what Neville is saying to do, which is the same thing as saying to imitate God, who calls things that are unseen as though they are seen. It's the same thing. We're saying the same message over and over again. But I think threading it together, seeing how it kind of weaves together, it paints a clearer picture for the mind, that when you see that you are governed by systems, you are. There's no question about it. You're born into a family system. You're born into a belief system, which would be like a religion. You're born into these systems of belief that teach you a very important thing that's wrong, that it's outside of you. That's what they teach you. So you have to believe in an outside God. Everything's on the outside. They judge solely upon appearances. And what does it say God doesn't do? He doesn't judge after appearances. So that's why Neville says that if you judge by the appearances, you'll be enslaved by them. Or sorry, if you judge by the senses, for what we judge by, we're enslaved by it. So that's why he tells you to judge by your imagination, you'll be free. Because in imagination, you can judge after anything. It's really up to you to decide what you will be inside your imagination. That's really what we live by, because man doesn't live by bread alone. There's more to life than just bread. And you have concepts of yourself that you hold dear, that you've held on for maybe a long time. But you might want to change it. And the way you change it is you know you are a new thing, and that's you forgiving yourself, believe it or not. You're actually partaking in Scripture. You're actually doing it. You're not just being a hearer. You can hear me say this right now, but not do anything about it. Not know yourself to be different. Once you know yourself to be different, you have become a doer. And so when you see this message this way, it's far more freeing. And from my perspective, it's far more freeing. It's less work than you think. It's not exhausting. It energizes you. It brings clarity to you. Because really the thing that's blinding you is your low self-concept of like the ideas that you hold that are not things you want. That is what's blinding you in your life. So from my perspective, I see no greater being to imitate. I look around and I see man who's having to do the same things I have to do. They have to breathe, they have to eat, they have to go to the bathroom, they have to take up their body every day. And they're the same as me. And I can't imitate what's the same as me. It's just, might as well just be me. What's the point of imitating anything? But if I want to imitate something, I should imitate God, who calls things that are unseen as though they are seen. And so to me, those two quotes come together very well. And I really feel this is what Neville was trying to convey to us. It's an appropriation. And you must create a new system to live under for yourself, something you decided within yourself. And I'm choosing to imitate, I'm choosing to follow Scripture. I'm just telling you honestly. And I'm going to try to practice this the best I can. I was asked a question in the comments that I thought was, I thought, why not? So they asked me if I could explain at least the artwork that I chose and why I chose it. And I'm just going to do that. Yeah, I thought that would be a cool idea. So for this image here, obviously I see a man contemplating, right? He's in the realm of thought here. And there's these different choices. At least these arches represent at least choices. And I just mentioned how Scripture tells us that I brought you into a land of blessings and cursings, but choose life. And that's what I see a man doing here. I see him, the stairs represent going inward or going up into himself. And I see him deciding to choose life. At least it's a choice. It's sort of in the realm of, he hasn't necessarily chose it yet, but it's something that will be chosen. He's seen himself on the edge over there. At least I think that's him going down a different avenue instead of going up. And he might be leaning more to that direction of choosing whichever one that would be for him. But I see a man at least contemplating on the idea of what life means. What does it mean to choose life? And he can make other choices. He seems to be free to decide other things, but I feel like he's reached a point where he wants to choose a life more abundant. He wants to imagine for himself greater. And maybe that's what it, maybe he was going up these stairs and he reached a point where he realized this wasn't the way. And it seems like, and the other side, there's a ladder there that seems to be, he's almost a bit confused on where he's going, doesn't quite know. And so that's what I see in this image. I just see somebody deciding to imagine a life more abundant and to imagine really upon, because we're told God is life, so to imagine upon God and what does God mean and who is it? Not necessarily interested anymore in the existence of God, but who is God? That's what it seems like to me. And that's why I chose this one. I think it's a great image to describe at least a moment in imagination where you're kind of interested in God. And God resembles this tree. At least he's looking at a part of himself. So that's why I chose this one. But I'm going to end that one here. Thank you for listening. I know this one was a little bit longer than normal. But I also do, I got to mention, I do one-on-ones. I have a book out, and I do live streams with Q&As as well. So if you're interested in that, just go to the description. It'll all be there. So again, thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.